اللهم صل وسلم على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In the Quran من رحمة الله بنا أنه عرفنا بنفسه. One of the beautiful things that you see in our deen and you see in the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has introduced himself to us. Remember that there are three ways of knowing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can know him through rational deduction, reasonable deduction. You come to a building and you see how the details are in the building. You don't know who the architect is, but you can appreciate and find out some of the attributes of the architect without meeting them. You can say, they're very detail-oriented. They were thinking very efficiently. They wanted to make use of the space. Even though you have never met the architect, but out of what you have seen, you can draw some reasonable attributes of this architect. You can also know him through what he said about himself. And this is in the Quran, this is the case. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces himself to us. And the way that the Quran does this is by his names and attributes. He tells about his names and attributes. بِأَسْمَائِهِ وَصِفَاتِهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى. I'm just going to give you one example. So remember that the most repeated attribute in the Quran about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that he is Raheem subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Raheem. I think I've shared with you before that this is the time when they start announcing the Nobel Prize winners. You know, they start speaking about who's winning in chemistry, who's winning in physics, who's winning in science, economics. Part of it also is who is winning in literature. And many times what you see, the people who are winning literature, they speak languages that we don't know. Somebody spoke and wrote in Chinese, there is Bengali, there is Arabic, there is Hebrew, there is English, there is French, there is German, different languages. But why would somebody that wrote in Chinese be appreciated by English speakers? Obviously the work is translated. And they say that there is a type of language that is referred to as universal language. لغة يعرفها كل العالم. There is a language that is actually spoken by every single person on planet Earth. Some people say that language is smile. Smile is a universal language, but depending on the culture, it can be misunderstood. Some people say music is a universal culture. Everybody knows music, but which, or music is a universal language, but which music depends on the culture that you come to. And then people eventually say that the most understood universal language is, who said love, mashallah, tabarakallah. What's your name? What is it? Kazi? Kaza. Kazi, you're wrong. Huh? Okay. So what is the most common universal language بالدنيا? Tears. Not a bad shismo. So they say that the most universal language is rahmah. See, if you see somebody holding the hands of an elderly person, helping them cross the street, it does not matter what culture you come from, everybody knows what is going on. Everybody knows what is going on. Because you spoke what we call a universal language. And that is why the most repeated attribute of Allah in the Quran is rahmah. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam to us, what does Allah say about him? وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And we have sent you but as a mercy to mankind. Why mercy? Because that is the most spoken universal language. When Allah speaks about Himself, what do you find? The most repeated attribute of Allah is that Allah is Raheem. Let me give you something here really, really nice. So in Arabic, we have what we call siyagh al-mubalagha. There are levels, different levels of hyperbole. And there are different levels of superlativeness. So in English you say this is big and bigger and biggest. Smart, smarter, smartest, and so on. So you've got three different levels in Arabic, and then afterwards in English you'd have to use a different language. This is big, bigger, and biggest, but then you say it's humongous, it's gigantic, and so on. In Arabic, what you do is that you continue using the same word, but you change a little bit of the construction of the word, and what that does is that it adds intensity. يقول فلان يكذب. You know, a person is lying. But you can say the person is lying in what they're saying right now. كاذب. And then you say this person is a habitual liar. كذاب. Then you say this person is cunningly lying. كذوب. And so on. But here is the kicker. They say that the absolute highest, most superlative form in Arabic ما جاء على وزن فعلان. فعلان تفيد الامتلاء والتشبع. Anything that comes in this form in Arabic, refer to them as one of the different superlative forms, that ends in alif and noon, that is the state of saturation beyond which you cannot add anything. اللهم إنا نسألك رضوانك. Ridwan. Not only I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with me, but I want the most pleasure of Allah. Ridwan. The hereafter is truly حيوان. يعني إيش حيوان? That is like the real truth. Okay? And then comes that one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is Al-Rahman. Meaning that His mercy, that attribute, there is nothing that you can add into it. وجميل في القرآن قول الله جل وعلا إن رحمتي وسعت كل شيء. So one of the attributes of Allah is that He is Al-Wasi', the vast. جميل ما قاله الإمام الغزالي. Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali described this so beautifully, and he said, أسماء الله مطلقة كلها حسنى. The names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are absolute. So he said, if Allah calls Himself the vast, for it to be perfectly vast, like the absolutely most perfect vastness, he said, think about in an ocean that does not have any shores, because it's vast. We want to make sure that it's vast. How big? Ghazali said if it has a beginning and an end, it's not big. In order for it to be very, very vast, it cannot have an end, it cannot have a beginning. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is vast. His knowledge is vast. His authority is vast. And then He said that His maghfirah, forgiveness, is vast. And then He said His rahmah is vast. And for it to be perfect, He said, imagine that you have this ocean that does not have a beginning or an end. He said, well, it is so perfectly vast that there is no amount that you can take from it that will make it diminish, and there is no amount that you can put into it that will increase it. What can you do? You can take as much as you want. It will not decrease. You can put as much as you want. It will not increase. And that is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we do this, say, remember two things. Never ever be guilty of depriving a person from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If it is this vast, لا نقنط الناس من رحمة الله. If it is this vast, you cannot make people go into despair knowing how kind and merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. And then they say, if the mercy of Allah is so big, you really have to be a miserable person not to have a share of it. How can you miss out? It is so vast. It is a sea that does not have any shores, which means that it's everywhere, yet you can't get water. You'd have to be extremely lost at that point. And how do we get there? يقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. Be kind and merciful to those who are on earth, the one in heaven will be merciful towards you. الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن يوم القيامة. Those who are kind, the most merciful will be kind to them on the day of judgment. لذلك قالوا لا يجتمع مع الإيمان قساوة قلب وبخل. Said it's almost impossible that a person can be a person of faith, claiming to be a practicing Muslim, and be either cruel or stingy. لا يمكن. If you believe that you are religious, practicing, but you are cruel, there is something wrong with your religiosity. By virtue of having Iman, Iman is supposed to make you a tender person, a nice person, a kind person, a gentle person. If you're not that, then there is something wrong with our religiosity. لا يجتمع قساوة قلب مع إيمان. You cannot be hard of heart, you cannot be cruel, yet claim to have Iman. Impossible. And also you cannot be cruel, you cannot claim to have Iman and yet be stingy. That just, it does not happen. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who are kind, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show His mercy to us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Was that a hand that I saw? Did I see a hand? Yeah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind, Ya Rabbil Alameen, be kind to us, and may we be kind to those who are around us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد. Oh, Fajr inshallah tomorrow is at 6:10 and Isha is at 8:30 inshallah. Oh, 6:15? Sorry. So 6:15. Fajr is at 6:15. Fajr is at 6:15 and Isha is at 8:30 inshallah.